Okay. Hi there, my name is Sam Black. I work for NatureScot. I'm an environmental data and innovative technologies officer. I'm here presenting at the Coigach Living Landscape online event and presenting our high value open habitats survey. So who are NatureScot and what do we do? Well, we work to enhance our natural environment and inspire the people of Scotland to care more about it. We believe that a nature-rich future where everyone is involved will make us all happier, healthier, wealthier and more equal. Day to day, we are Scottish Government's advisor on all aspects of nature, wildlife management, and landscape across Scotland. And we also work in partnership a lot of the time with local authorities, community groups, non-governmental organisations, charities, and land and sea managers. Now, on a fundamental level, in all of that work, it's really important that we understand what exactly is going on in our seas, on our land across Scotland, so that we can provide accurate and contemporary advice in relation to all of this stuff going on. Furthermore, when talking about that nature-rich future, it's really important we understand and recognise the importance of our relationship as a society with nature through the places we live, work, visit, heal, and play. So, in that first component, the bit about understanding what's going on, in our habitats, across our land and sea, we have quite a good experience, a good expertise in doing all that, and we've been doing it for a number of years for a variety of different reasons. For example, our protected areas, it's really important we understand the extent and distribution of species and habitats in the protected areas, so we know how to manage them and how they can flourish. The same is true outside of our protected areas. So not only do we need to know the distribution of rare and important habitats and species across Scotland, we need to know about how climate change and biodiversity loss and land use change is changing things in the broad scale. So, I mean, that might be all the way from our wetlands at the coast up to the highest points in our mountains. It's important we understand and know what is going on. When it comes to protecting people and nature, we also have a wealth of experience in terms of connecting people and nature. So we've worked on a lot of projects that have kind of tried to reflect those values. A good example is our community-led marine biodiversity monitoring, as shown in that picture on the bottom left, where we've helped to equip and train local community groups as to how they can monitor biodiversity of local sea areas. We've also worked in southern Scotland, work all across Scotland, but a good example is with the South Lanarkshire Council, where we worked with community groups, primary schools and pupils in those schools to help renovate the former derelict golf course into the new Fernbury Meadows green space, which is now a haven for those seeking nature, space and exercise. So whilst not all of our project work lends itself to that kind of community model, what we are finding is that that is often the most successful and rewarding projects in our work. So in recognition of this, NatureScot, perhaps now more than ever, are really keen to get involved in that sort of community-orientated project work. And it's why probably NatureScot were so keen and are, still so pleased to have been involved in the Coigach Living Landscape project. So, as we are celebrating here at this virtual event, we feel that the, partnership was the perfect loci around which projects could be developed and delivered, all with the aim of enhancing the kind of economic and environmental prospects of this fantastic part of Scotland. Now, I know that NatureScot's involvement in this partnership has been pretty broad, and I can't comment on it all, but what I can comment on is the high value open habitat survey, and that is what I'll begin or continue to talk about for the rest of the presentation. But yeah, it was one of those projects delivered within the partnership, one of the 30 or so, delivered in the past 5 years. So the high value open habitat survey largely came about in recognition of the internationally important habitats we see in the Coigach Living Landscape area. So the area has been botanised quite a lot, actually, over the course of hundreds of years. Previously, it's been called a wet desert, but we all know that this is very much not the case. It's very unique. The landscapes of Coigach lie where we have this oceanic Atlantic wet climate meeting the kind of Arctic alpine conditions of up in the mountains, and that unique combination creates quite unique conditions where we see, Atlantic oak woodland at its most northerly limits. We have bryophyte communities that you'll struggle to find elsewhere apart from the Himalayas, and we've got Arctic char in some of these inland sea lochs. So it's a really unique and special area in terms of its habitats and species. So in recognition of that, we want to always learn more and find out about these habitats and species in the area. So we identified an area of about 60 kilometres squared around these fantastic mountains, Sylvan and Canisp. So the area is owned by the Canisp Estate, owned and managed by the Ascent Foundation. And like the kind of wider area, it has been botanized but never mapped in any great detail. One of the kind of obvious things from the map is that it's quite a remote area. Any of you that have walked in there know that it is hard ground. And if we were to go and say, let's go and take a look at this whole area and then find out exactly what's there, it's a pretty big challenge. So we want to think about what innovative technologies we could use that could help make that job a bit easier. But before we focus on what those innovative technologies were used in the High Value Open Habitat Survey, it's worth mentioning existing methods for field surveying. So if you're not familiar with it, basically it involves going out and finding out what is on the ground, and that involves a lot of rain, paper notes, and two broad categories. Sometimes you'll go out with a kind of pre-prepared plan where you're going to assess the condition of specific protected features, that might be a species or a habitat, or a kind of geological interest, and you monitor the condition of it. A kind of less common one would be to say, here's this area, we want to know what is in it. You go out, write down what you see, come back, type up your notes or put it onto a pen drive and then send it to NatureScot. We'll then ingest it into our digital systems. It's all good. It's been carried out, for a number of years, but it is a fact. And we are always asking, how can we improve that? And that is what this project was about. It's about looking at how we can improve that. So what that meant was the starting place was taking, well, let's look at a new source of data. What data do we already have? And that is aerial imagery and satellite imagery. So we basically what we did for this is that we took that imagery, very high resolution imagery, we fed it into our computers, and basically using various programs and statistical kind of tricks, we used the computers to identify differences in the aerial imagery to then predict different habitats on the ground. So kind of just to bring that to life a little bit, we can see in aerial imagery on the top left there, it shows different kind of color signals, and we then use the computers to split those color signals into different areas thought to represent different habitats on the ground. So when we did that process, applied to the 60 kilometer squared area of aerial images, we got 2,200 discrete little pockets or polygons thought to represent different habitats. So as you can imagine, the fieldwork component was then going out and checking what exactly was in each of these little areas using a team of field surveyors. So that task was carried out in the summer of 2020. And as I said, it was to conclusively categorize what were in those polygons. A subsidiary aim of the project was to map tree distribution or any other kind of interesting species that were found in the landscape whilst they were out surveying. Now, what they didn't do was go out with paper and record and draw maps and polygons on paper. It started out with using a tablet. They were all familiar with a tablet, but basically it was a digital means of data collection. They could, like is pictured on the presentation here, they could see exactly where they were on a map on the tablet. They could also see these polygons, and essentially all they had to do, they had to go and click on the polygon, and then that would bring up a menu quite similar to the one you might use for typing in your address when you're ordering something online. It has kind of predetermined questions, and it also has fields which you can click drop-down menus and use kind of pre-populated options. And what that does is saves time on typing. It avoids misprint or misspells, but also allows us to kind of use the secure and controlled language for identifying the habitats. And the language we used was the UNIS code for identifying habitats, and that is basically a European-wide systematic way of identifying the habitats, so that basically we can use these definitions and categories for a wide range of reasons. But it also again avoids mistakes and allows us to control it a little bit better. And that's essentially what they did. They walked around with tablets, visited all of these polygons, and when they got Wi-Fi after the end of the day, they could then click upload, and all that data uploaded automatically through the Ethernet and appeared on our systems almost instantaneously. So you might say data straight from the horse's mouth, and that we could then take and integrate into other systems and make publicly available if it was appropriate. So that is the power of this technology. Now, once that had all been carried out, everything had been visited, we typed up the results. So this is a kind of high-level presentation of the results at UNIS level 1, which is the broadest habitat type. So, inland surface waters, mires, bogs and fens, heath and scrub and tundra. That's the kind of classification level we're talking about. So at that level, what we see is an area characterized by this picture, but it's basically dominated by heathlands, bogs and rock slabs. So 63% of the area was in those categories or those habitat types. Northern wet heath was the most dominant habitat type. 54% of all of those little polygons were that category. The second most common was mires, bogs and fens. So that's 15% of all the polygons of the total area. And this picture is a good example of that. What is great though, is that that is a revegetated bog. So basically it has been formerly eroded and now for various reasons it is revegetating, it is recovering. And it goes to show in these areas what happens if you can alleviate the pressures, then the habitats can recover. So that is really great to see. Now, I'll not go into actually any more detail. What would happen is that you would go kind of down the rabbit hole into specific little details that separate the different habitat types, you know, small little ecological differences that to kind of the untrained eye don't mean much, but they really do in terms of wider ecological functioning. But I think we'll skip to some other results. But if you want to go into that, then let me know. And I'll also try and figure out through questions if we can get a link to the report, which will allow you to go into great detail. But I just want to skip to the trees because they're interesting, right? As I said, you know, they were mapping both tree seed distribution, that was the big seed trees, the ones that were more established, but also tree regeneration. So seed trees green on this map, and the regeneration is the purple. And basically, the regeneration ones are the kind of saplings. And overall, we see kind of pockets again of trees, established trees, and seed trees, and tree regeneration in an otherwise treeless landscape. So yeah, these trees are basically these little pockets of refugia, and they are inaccessible gorges or steep cliffs or places where deer can't get to or the wildfires don't get to either. And the commonest trees comprised of rowan, downy birch, along with eared willow, grey willow, and holly were also occasional, and aspen was quite scarce. Another interesting observation for the eagle-eyed folk out there will be those purple dots in canisp, and what those were montane willow, stands of montane willow, again in really accessible places where the deer can't get to. And basically that is a kind of small insight into Scotland's ancient woodland. Montane willow would have been a kind of component of that ancient woodland, and it's a small insight into the past, and it's great to see it's still there, at least clinging onto the side of northern cliffs of canisp. But yeah, as I said, taken together, this map is quite useful because if you want to kind of concentrate on afforestation of this area, a good place to start would be, well, where is the trees doing okay? Let's try and replicate what is going on there elsewhere. So it's a nice result and an interesting insight. Another one that I'll just finish with was peatland maps. So of course, in the habitat map, we were able to identify which parts were peatlands. Now you'll know Scottish Government big priority is restoring peatlands at the moment for reasons, capturing and sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere, making sure it stays locked in the ground to meet our net zero targets. But the tricky thing about peatland restoration is identifying where it is. Now, apart from the northeast of Scotland, where you see these big swathes of it, it is often quite pocketed, like you see here. And firstly, identifying areas is difficult, and then figuring out, well, how can they be restored is a tricky task, and will be really important as Scotland looks to upscale that process. So maps like this are really helpful for doing that. You have a place to start. You can assess whether or not they can then be restored, whether they've got any kind of massive recovery potential, and go from there. So, this process, these maps have a lot of value to them that way. But yeah, just to kind of sum up, in conclusion, we can say, or at least I feel like the survey was a big success. I mean, the call partnership gave us a kind of, it was a community-led project where we were able to kind of target a real kind of community interest area, and that helped us to mitigate any potential barriers in terms of access and logistics. And the feedback loop that the partnership created was also really helpful because it gave us that kind of feedback loop, that conduit from us sitting behind desks in various places to what actually was going on the ground. And I think that's really why such a challenging project was able to get off the ground so quickly. And obviously the call partnership staff were just incredibly important in that success. At our end, it was a big benefit because it allowed us a stable board for us to iron out any creases associated with that new technology and that new innovative survey methodology. And I'm probably mixing metaphors there, but any teething issues that always come along with when you do something new, then we had the kind of resources and the assistance to iron them out so that we could, mitigate them, overcome them, and eventually develop a really successful project. The skilled field surveyors are obviously a huge asset to us in this, and with their help and the help of the partnership, we got a lot of good feedback on the methodology that we can then feed back into new iterations to hopefully improve things, improve future survey efforts. And finally, we're working on a project at the moment which involves a Scotland-wide national map. It's not as high resolution as this, but we need to understand how confident we can be in that map. And part of this project that I'm talking about is about validating that map, checking what relating what is actually on the ground to what the map is predicting. Now, if we want to do that at a national Scotland-wide scale, we need to have a really quick and clear methodology that you can use to go and visit these sites. And this project through the Call Partnership has given us a lot of really useful information and like kind of beta information about how we can do that, how we can make it better, and what are potential pitfalls to avoid. So, I mean, in summary, yeah, we've learned a huge amount. We've got a lot to reflect on, a lot of things to go and work on. Working with the Call Partnership gave us insights and assistance, which were crucial, absolutely crucial to the success of the project. And we hope through the data that we've generated and we have provided, contributes to this rich understanding of people and place and the connection between the two in this absolutely fantastic part of the world. Anyway, I will be quiet for now. I'd just like to finish off by thanking Andy Scobie, who works with NatureScot. He largely spearheaded the project alongside Philippa Fagan, who really facilitated it alongside Call Partnership. So massive thanks to them, and also thanks to Ruth and Colin for doing the fieldwork. I understand, I think there is going to be some sort of live question and answer event later, so I'll be around for that. But in the meantime, thanks very much for watching the presentation, and hopefully catch up with you later. Cheers.